we have the finals matchup set.
Pretty good finals. What are you did a Game 7 recap on Monday night, which was pretty succinct in terms of sort of the initial thoughts. Has anything changed in terms of you thinking about this over the last 24 hours about this matchup?
Nothing has changed for me. Look, there's a couple of wild cards to me in this series. Number one, Tyler Hero makes a difference. Third leading scorer. I know he's been out since game 1 of the Milwaukee series, but he makes a difference. We saw him in that 2020 run when they made the finals in the bubble, have a number of big games, closed out a couple games that they won during that run. So if he's back, and the reports as of today are targeting game 3 for a return back in Miami, that could make a difference. And one thing I said the other night, and I went back and looked today at some late season statistics for the Heat. I feel like we're talking a lot about this fluky 3-point shooting. To me, it's more that their shooters have returned to their norms for their career. And for a large chunk of the season, roughly 80% of the season, they didn't shoot the ball well. Over their last 18 games of the regular season, they shot 38% from 3, top 10 in the league. They were a top 10 offense in the league. We know in a given matchup, Eric Spoelstra will play around with defensive schemes and the zone, which I'll talk about in a second. So I don't know that this is as big of a fluke as some people are making it out to be. And I would also say this in terms of the Heat advancing. We had a bunch of charts and graphs and data all season, and the year that kept coming up when we were talking about parity this season was 1984. 1984 was also coincidentally the season that they started conference seeding when we got to the playoffs. This postseason has had the most lower seeded wins in a series of any postseason since seeding began in 1984. So there's parity across the league. This is a team that made it to the finals in 2020 with largely the same core guys. I'll include Bam, Hero, and Jimmy in that. And made the Eastern Conference Finals Game 7 last year with largely the same group of guys. So maybe we shouldn't be that surprised. Also factoring in some injuries, Tatum's torn ankle, the Boston Celtics inconsistencies, Giannis's injury, of course. But yeah, we're going to get some more insight to that when we talk with Duncan. But I don't think that feels that far off, that it's not as fluky as we are making it out to be.
Yeah, not at all. There are two stats, or one stat and one just sort of overall point I wanted to bring up and get your perspective on. The Nuggets scored 1.21 points per possession against Zone D this season. You talked about this a little bit the other night. Obviously, the Heat are going to they're going to switch things up, and we're going to have a different conversation after games 1 and 2 to see what Spo has sort of cooked up. But it does feel like an initial concern for them. And then the other thing I was going to bring up was Jimmy versus Aaron Gordon. Jimmy scored 11.4 points per possession per 100 when defended by Gordon, according to Second Spectrum. His effective field goal percentage was 26%, 35% against everybody else. Obviously, we've talked about this with Gordon throughout the playoffs.
Wait, that was this season?
That was over the past 3 seasons.
Yeah, okay.
Over the past 3 seasons. And so we talked about this with Gordon when it came to LeBron. But it does feel like that is a matchup that Miami needs to win to have a chance to win the series, and it would be going against statistical form a little bit for him to dominate that matchup like he has in some of these other series.
Yeah, let's talk about the zone first. You touched on this in the newsletter today, a farewell to takes that we put out. I mentioned the postseason parity in the 7 wins for the lower seeded team as well in the newsletter, but I wanted to bring it up on the podcast, and I'm glad you brought up the zone stuff on this podcast as well, because it's worth talking about, because Boston really struggled against the zone. 0.9 points per possession against the zone, 8 of 46 from 3. The Denver Nuggets this season, their offense faced zone in 183 possessions, 11 of which came against the Heat. The Nuggets averaged 1.73 points per possession. And look, one of the problems with the Boston Celtic attack against the zone is there were too many possessions where the ball never got to the middle. And at times when they did get the ball to Jason Tatum in the middle of the court, he just turned and shot. And against the Denver Nuggets, that guy in the middle is going to be Nikola Jokic, who can shoot, can pass. That elbow foul line area, he led the NBA in touches, was 3rd in total points from the foul line area, and 1st in assists and 1st in field goal percentage from that elbow area. So when Nikola Jokic is on the floor, my expectation is that the Heat won't play a lot of zone. The other thing I wanted to bring up against Nikola Jokic is that in the 2 games this season, he pretty much has eviscerated any Heat defender against him. Bam, 1.29 points per play, 9 of 16 from the field, 56% overall from the field. And just, it was worse against everybody else. Shot 85% on 13 shots against everybody else. So I don't know that single coverage is the answer either against Jokic. And I've said it many times, Tommy, there's not a good answer against the Denver Nuggets and Nikola Jokic. There's not a good answer against the Denver Nuggets and the Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray 2-man game. So Eric Spoelstra is going to have to get creative. My expectation, again, is that I would expect to see a lot of double teams against Jokic. He's faced 78 double teams in the postseason. Nuggets are only scoring 0.9 points out of those and only shooting 38% from the field out of those double teams. So that's sort of my expectation defensively for how the Miami Heat are going to guard the Denver Nuggets. Now, I could be way off. That's what the data suggests. Spo obviously trusts Bam. There will be single coverage at times. He trusts his zone. There will be zone at times. I recognize all of that, but I think we're going to see a healthy dose of double teams. On the Jimmy, Aaron, I think that's a key matchup overall. The Denver Nuggets are likely going to score at an efficient rate. They just faced the Los Angeles Lakers and had an offensive rating of 122 against the playoffs' best defense. So they're likely going to score. Jimmy's ability to create efficient offense, both as a passer and a scorer, is going to be the key for the whole thing for the Miami Heat. And Aaron Gordon has done as good a job as anyone in these playoffs of guarding primary shot creators. If Jimmy can win that matchup, the Heat have a chance.
It's interesting you brought up their efficiency. I was pulling this earlier. So regular season, the Nuggets points per 100 possessions, 116.8. First round, 117.2. Second round, 120. Conference finals, 122.3. Can you remember? I don't know whether this has happened before in recent memory. Can you remember this was a team that was incredibly efficient during the regular season, but just making a jump like this every round? And to your point, what you just said, against what was the playoffs' best defense at that point in the Lakers series.
I don't remember it, but I will say this. Last game I did of the postseason was game 6 in the second round in Miami against the New York Knicks when they closed out the Knicks. And I asked Spo a question about Jimmy in the playoffs. I can't remember the exact question, but I'll never forget what he said. He said, well, everything gets streamlined in the playoffs. And so when you think about the Denver Nuggets and their offense, picture them streamlining that offense. Picture them streamlining their rotations. Picture them giving, instead of 36 to 38 minutes for Nikola Jokic, 42 to 44 minutes. Same thing for Jamal Murray. Instead of running 10 dribble handoffs with Jamal Murray and Jokic, they're running 12. Instead of 10 pick and rolls, they're running 15. I think that has a lot to do with it. And obviously, same thing with Miami. They've shot the ball well. They've had big nights from guys like Michael Porter, big nights from KCP. And that's why I go back to, like, there's not a good answer. This is why I think Hero coming back and providing a little offensive punch is a big key for the Miami Heat. If they can steal a game in Denver, I think we're going to have a hell of a series. I really do. I think we're going to have a hell of a series.
And they've been doing it. The Heat have been doing it everywhere. So we'll see who holds form in game one.
This is history lesson here. Fantastic stuff from our guy Matthew Williams over at ESPN. This will be the 8th time that the finals features a team where one team went to game 7 and one team is coming off a sweep. Last time it happened was 2013. Heat went to 7 games against the Pacers. Spurs swept in the Western Conference Finals. Heat obviously won that series. In the previous 7 times it's happened, the team that played in game 7 and it beat the other team 3 out of the 7 times. So it's the rest thing. It's a double-edged sword. It really is. The rhythm thing, it's a double-edged. It's all about who plays well on night one. Can you steal a game in Denver? And that's important. Speaking of game 1, you brought it up. DraftKings Nuggets right now 8.5-point favorites. Over under. I find this fascinating. 219 total points for the over under. 58% of the bets are on the over. 88% of the money is on the over as well. I'm probably going to take the over on that. I might log on later. That seems like an over, given how the Nuggets are playing and sort of this feeling out for the Heat.
I wanted to ask you about the DraftKings MVP odds. We've talked a bunch. You just did the other night. But we've talked a bunch about Alfred's, most recently Caleb Martin. The Heat have a bunch of different options. Is there a world, and we can run through some of these numbers, is there a world where an Alfred can win a finals MVP? Or is this just like if Denver wins, it's Joker. If Miami wins, it's Jimmy. And it's kind of like, not who cares, but you know what I mean? Like there's not any, because I think part of this where this sort of question comes from is there was a lot of justified chatter that Martin had a good case to win MVP in the Eastern Conference Finals. And I don't think Jimmy particularly cared about it either way, but it is a question of like, is that a thing that is actually like a realistic thing? Are we ever going to get another Iguodala?
Good question. And I definitely think it's possible to get another Iguodala because we just nearly had that in the Eastern Conference Finals. I made the argument today that it should have been, and I'm glad it was, Jimmy Butler, and that's not to take anything away from Caleb Martin, but you're asking guys to play 2 very different roles, and Caleb is a direct beneficiary of Jimmy's creation for others. I mean, that's just the reality of it. That's not to take anything away from his shot making, and that's certainly not to take anything away from some of the ridiculous one-on-one shots that he made in Game 7 when he was just on fire. Series MVP right now, Jokic at -360, odds-on favorite, Butler at +330. Then it jumps big time. Murray at +1,700, Bam at +4,000, Caleb Martin at +5,000, Michael Porter Jr. at +10,000. I think it's more likely that it's not an Alfred and that it's a Robin in this. If we're really talking about it, it's more likely it's a Jamal Murray or it's a Bam if it's not one of Jimmy Butler or Nikola Jokic. And obviously, the series MVP at -360 for Jokic, those odds reflect the overall series. Nuggets at -400, heavy favorites, and the Heat at +310. I do like the Nuggets to win this series, but I expect this, whether it is 4 games, 5 games, 6 games, 7 games, I expect this every game to be super competitive. And also my expectation is that Jimmy's at his best, even with Aaron Gordon. And that's just my expectation.
I think after the Milwaukee series, it should have shut any doubts down that this team, when locked in at their full potential, can beat anybody. And the Hero thing is really a wild card. I mean, he's 20 points a game, 38% from 3, and you're adding that to a team that has, is leading the playoffs in 3-point shooting right now. It's going to be interesting.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Massachusetts, call 800-327-5050 or visit gamblinghelplinema.org. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Kansas, call 1-800-522-4700 on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. In West Virginia, gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. All games regulated by the West Virginia Lottery. Please play responsibly. In partnership with Hollywood Casino at Charlestown Races in Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 21 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gaming resources. Opt-in and 10 plus leg required for 100% boost. Eligibility, wagering, and deposit restrictions apply. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/basketball terms. Yeah, before we get to Duncan, real quick, I just want to note I will be jumping on YouTube Lives like I did during the conference finals. We'll be diving into a bunch of games during the finals. That's Islands in the League, our series with DraftKings that's only on YouTube. So please subscribe over on YouTube, and we'll give everybody a heads up on social on which games I'll be jumping on live. Those recaps will be on the next day. One thing that I'm looking forward to is seeing how Miami defends the Jokic Murray action, and particularly who the matchups are with Jamal Murray. And then the other part is, look, Aaron Gordon's going to start on Jimmy Butler. We all know Jimmy Butler is going to try to manipulate some ball screens and get the matchup he wants. And how they defend that is the thing that I'm watching on the Denver side defensively.